Did you know that the Spanish Armada was defeated as much by storms as by the English Navy? Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly and today's video is all about King Philip II of Spain's enterprise of England and his defeat at the hands of the Royal Navy of Elizabeth I of England in 1588. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organisation and you can find us on Patreon, a brilliant site where you can support our work and receive exclusive benefits in return. Your support helps us create videos twice a week, so make sure to check it out via the pop-up in the top corner of the screen or via the Patreon link down below. Before we can get into the Spain versus England naval battle, we need to introduce the players and what the lead up and catalyst to the conflict was. So Philip of Spain was arranged to be married to Mary I of England by his father, King Charles V of Spain. Mary I of England was the daughter of King Henry VIII of England and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and she was a staunch Catholic. During her reign as Queen of England, Mary reversed the English Reformation, initiated by her father, and through her persecution of Protestants, she earned the nickname Bloody Mary. Philip and Mary's marriage wasn't a particularly happy one. In 1556, they became King and Queen of Spain, but just 2 years later, Mary died of cancer, and her half-sister Elizabeth I became the next Queen of England. Philip didn't wait to propose marriage to Elizabeth, but she declined. As Queen, Elizabeth worked to undo the work of her predecessor, in that she steered England away from Catholicism and back towards Protestantism. Elizabeth reinstituted the Act of Supremacy, which put the English monarch at the head of the church instead of the Pope. And in her efforts to impose Protestantism in Catholic Ireland just rebelled against her numerous times, and often with the material support of Spain. By supporting the Protestants in the Netherlands, who were protesting against Philip's rule, Elizabeth put herself directly against the King of Spain, who saw himself as the champion of Catholicism in Europe. Then another Mary entered the scene, this time Mary Queen of Scots. Mary Stuart, as fairly obvious by her title, was the Queen of Scotland and daughter of King James V of Scotland and Mary of Guise. She married Dauphin Francis and became Queen of both France and Scotland, until the death of her husband just 1 year into their reign. Mary, Queen of Scots, returned to Scotland, and as a Catholic, she eventually clashed with the Protestant Scottish, with whom she was unpopular. Mary fled to England, thinking she would be safe with Elizabeth, but instead she was imprisoned for 19 years. Mary became something of a figurehead for the plots to remove Elizabeth from the throne. Many of the Catholics of England thought Elizabeth was illegitimate and didn't recognise Henry VIII's divorce from Catherine of Aragon, and so they wanted Mary as queen instead. Obviously, Mary was somewhat of a threat to Elizabeth's reign, and eventually in 1587, Elizabeth signed Mary's death warrant, and she was executed at 44 years of age. Did you know that only a small fraction of viewers are subscribers? Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our new videos, and to help us create more great history content. Elizabeth still didn't have an heir, and it seemed that everyone wanted her throne, especially Philip. Not to mention, the King of Spain wasn't all too happy with the English Queen's support of the Protestant rebellions in the Netherlands, in the form of several thousand troops and money, which had disrupted trade. Of course, he also wasn't too thrilled with England's rejection of Catholicism and the Pope, or of the actions of the privateers, such as Francis Drake, who plundered Spanish ships of their gold and silver, with some of these dubious exploits being funded by the Queen herself. Spain was retaliating, though, by confiscating English ships in Spanish ports, and not allowing English merchants access to New World trade. Philip had been preparing for an invasion of England for a long while in a plan he called the Enterprise of England. But it had to be delayed after Drake destroyed some valuable ships and supplies bound for Spain as part of Philip's plans in Cadiz in 1587. Despite this setback, Philip was determined and even gained both the blessing and financial support of Pope Sixtus V, since he presented himself as the sword of the Catholic Church. Philip assembled his enormous fleet, his armada of 132 ships, which wasn't as big as he had hoped considering the English attacks and his financial issues. Still though, his armada was packed with 17,000 soldiers and 7,000 mariners, and the plan was for it to establish dominance in the English Channel, and then pick up a second army courtesy of Philip's regent, the Duke of Parma, when they reached the Netherlands. Then the fleet would sail to England, commanded by the Duke of Medina Sidonia. Philip was also hoping that he would be supported in England by English Catholics who wanted to see Elizabeth's downfall. The Spanish Armada was made up of galleons, large ships designed not for warfare, but for transportation, and they were far less nimble than the smaller English ships they were to come up against. Elizabeth was lucky that both Henry VIII and Mary I had decided that putting money into England's Royal Navy was a worthy investment, and she reaped the rewards of her predecessor's foresight, with a fleet of around 130 ships commanded by Lord Howard of Effingham. With their smaller ships, it was hoped that they would be able to dash in and out of the Spanish fleet and cause havoc. And on top of this, England also had 20 royal galleons that were better armed than the Spanish ships, and their guns could fire further. Not to mention, the English also had experienced and audacious commanders like Martin Frobisher and Vice Admiral Drake, who was called El Drac, or the Dragon, by the Spanish. The Spanish Armada had to first stop at the port of Corunna because of storms, and so it took them 2 months to reach the English Channel. Because of this delay, the invasion wasn't much of a surprise to the English, who had spotted the galleons off the coast of Cornwall on July 19, 1588. The next day, the English fleet sailed to meet the invaders. The navies of around 50 fighting ships on each side engaged in battle 3 times over the next week, off Eddystone, Portland, and the Isle of Wight. They weren't just fighting each other either, but also the storms. The Spanish used their line abreast formation, a giant crescent, which meant the English ships couldn't take advantage of their manoeuvrability, but they did still manage to fire heavily at the wings of the Armada. On July 27th, the Spanish had to retreat for safe anchorage off Calais after losing only 2 ships. On the night of July 28th, Drake organised 6 fireships to be sent into the Spanish Armada, with strong winds blowing the unmanned ships into the anchored fleet. The Spanish ships were quickly set alight, and the devastating flames spread fast. The next day, the English sent in their ships for the kill. Now with 4 ships lost and many others damaged by cannon fire, the Spanish fleet broke formation and they lost 120 anchors that they hastily cut to escape the fireships. The Armada was hit with increasingly strong southwest winds, and the Duke of Medina Sidonia couldn't get close enough to grapple and board the English ships, so he ordered a retreat and abandoned the invasion. Due to the storms, the Armada had to sail around the tempestuous and rocky shores of Scotland and Ireland in order to return home. They were pursued by some English ships, but it was the storms and the unfamiliar coastline that did the most damage to the Spanish fleet. They quickly ran out of provisions, horses were thrown overboard, ships were wrecked, and any of the crew who managed to escape the ships to land were handed over to the authorities and executed. Due to further storms in the Atlantic, by October 1588, only half of the Spanish Armada made it back to Spain, and England was saved. In case the Armada managed to make landfall, Elizabeth had stationed troops at strategic points, and she visited her army at Tilbury in Essex to defend London, with another army stationed on the northeast coast, and a mobile army that followed the progress of the Spanish fleet along the English coast. Her army of 16,500 men at Tilbury was meant to be led by Robert Dudley, the first Earl of Leicester. But when he fell ill, Elizabeth herself donned armour and rode atop a horse, rousing her troops with a speech. This was the beginning of her status as a living legend. Despite the disaster that was his great enterprise, Philip did not give up and tried to invade England again on 2 separate occasions, once in 1596 and once in 1597, but each time his fleet was impeded by storms. He also supported the rebellions of Catholic Ireland by sending money and troops in 1601. In order to pay for her war with Spain, Elizabeth raised taxes, encouraging a rise in the crime rate and unemployment, as well as inflation, which was all atop of a run of bad harvests. Despite these negative aspects, England experienced a new confidence after their victory over the Spanish Armada, and the Royal Navy would continue to develop under the following monarchs, after proving how beneficial a well-armed fleet with well-trained crews could be for not only protecting, but extending the power of England. How different do you think history would be if the Spanish Armada won? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our new videos published every single week. This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia. For more great articles and interactive content, head to our website via the link below. If you like my sweater, you can find this design and a bunch more in our shop at worldhistory.store, or you can find a link for it down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you soon with another video.